Welcome to my World History Notes, where I read from the book that I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. It's sort of a survey. It's not very deep, but it does tell you about events, people, places, concepts that you should know about to be conversant in world history. So we're in the 1600s, 1700s, um, and 1800s, and I'm discussing European politics today. So let's begin back in Europe, uh, because we're talking about colonial America, back in Europe between 1698 and 1699, Peter the First of Russia and Augustus the Second of Poland, who was also Elector of Saxony, joined Frederick the Fourth of Denmark in a secret alliance against Sweden, who was in control of the Baltic Sea region. The resultant war is called the Great Northern War and lasted from 1700 until 1721, when it was ended by the Treaty of Nystadt, having Russia supplant Sweden as the Baltic's dominant power, making Russia a major European power. With the last Spanish Habsburg king, Charles II, childless, there was a war over who would rule Spain, with French interests speaking loudly. The War of the Spanish Succession began in 1701, with France occupying forts in the Spanish Netherlands, resulting in several powers joining for war. This conflict lasted until 1715 and was concluded with the Treaty of Madrid. The English forces that led the Allies against France were led by John Churchill to become first Duke of Marlborough, ancestor of Winston Churchill, and considered to be Britain's greatest military genius for his actions during this war that saw England, the Netherlands, Austria, Prussia, and most of the German states, and Portugal line up against Savoy, Mantua, Cologne, and Bavaria under the leadership of France. Eventually, Savoy switched sides. It's been said that Churchill never lost a battle. When Louis XIV of France died in 1715, his grandson, Philip of Spain, the uncle of Louis XV, wanted to be King of France also. England again was opposed to any union between France and Spain. This began the War of the Quadruple Alliance between 1718 and 1720, as most other wars in Europe, consisting of forces of one relative fighting against the forces of another relative by marriage or birth. England and the Netherlands lined up against France and Spain, ending in the Treaty of The Hague in 1720, and not a lot being settled, but the balance of power in Europe being maintained, with France a superpower and England and the Netherlands with their allies, keeping them in some kind of check. In Poland, the death of Augustus II saw the beginning of the War of the Polish Succession, lasting for 5 years between 1733 and 1738, with Russia invading Poland. The Treaty of Vienna in 1738, which resulted in Poland's king abdicating and several rulers swapping territory like pieces on a game board. The Austro-Russian Turkish War of 1736, an outgrowth of the War of the Polish Succession, lasted for 3 years until the Treaty of Nissa in 1739 forced the Russians to make peace with Turkey and abandon hopes of building a navy on the Black Sea. With the death of Joseph I, there was the War of Austrian Succession between 1740 and 1748, with several rival claimants to the throne, at least one of them, Archduke Charles IV of Austria, having been involved in the War of the Spanish Succession as a claimant for the throne of that country. Maria Theresa inherited the Habsburg Empire upon the death of Charles IV. Frederick II of Prussia got involved on her behalf but wanted Silesia in return. She refused, and the side war called the First Silesian War took place between 1740 and 1742. After the brief interval of the Second Silesian War, the Treaty of Dresden, um, Prussia was victorious, and Maria Theresa honored Frederick's claims to Silesia, and the election of her husband as emperor. Once again, France and England squared off as allies of opposing sides, with France and Prussia being together. These two Silesian wars were intertwined with the War of the Austrian Succession. Finally, this round of hostilities in Europe ended inconclusively in 1748. Now, to interject my own personal comments here plainly, I believe on the political front, Satan's main efforts have been to work toward lining up one worldwide government standing opposed to God in the last days, as his efforts in the religious sphere is to align mankind under one worldwide religion opposed to God. This, of course, is all done convincing mankind that he and she are moving toward a better world by this union in order to stop war, poverty, injustice, and religious bigotry, and finally doing what God really wants for mankind. To me, history has been very clear on these points. That being said, back in Great Britain, um, well, actually, I think what I'll do is stop there because we'll go back to Great Britain next time. There's some very interesting things there. We'll move to the Italy and the Turkish Ottoman Empire. So let's just go next time for that. So thank you very much for watching this. I hope you will study world history and come to your own conclusions. Thank you very much.